There you go.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, since we have a few new faces here, I think I'll take a minute just to say welcome and thank you for being here. Want to make sure that since people are aware of who the committee members are, I'm Rama Blake and I am chairman and have been involved in the committee for quite a while. I started on PLIC, if anybody remembers that acronym way back when the ferry lease went out. And I'm currently chairman, and Charles Bailey is our vice chair. And Mike McKenzie is serving as secretary. And Jim Dickinson is, he's one of our best marine experts in some ways, and longtime Islander, which is huge. So I appreciate that. And then we also have Rich Hudson, who's senior master, and he's been great supporting the committee, and Roland Middleton with Public Works. And Roland he's been fabulous in helping us move forward on all the legal steps and resolutions and funding steps that we've been taking on getting the replacement ferry. So just wanted to make sure everybody knew everybody. Chris Colburn served on the committee for 6+ years. He has been a faithful off-island representative and worked for WTA for years and is now retired from WTA. But welcome, Chris, and I love the fact that you follow our work. So thank you very much. Let's start the meeting.
Can you also mention the two other members who are not present?
Yes,
Judy and Greg.
Absolutely. Yeah, Judy Olson is typically with us, but she is still a working girl and had a work function tonight. She needed to attend, so we will miss her. She's always been a great member, and Greg Rice has been our other off-island representative. And Jim, you'll want to know that he actually sent just a brief email response today, and he's had health issues, so he has not been attending. But anyway, for those interested, we will have some important slots to fill come January. And just so you know, there is an application place at the county website. I'm happy to send it to you. And applications are due by January 4th. So put in a plug for that, because it's important to have good people on this committee. It took a lot to get it going, and we want to keep doing good work here. So just for a moment of silence to bring our best to this meeting. Thank you. Usually at this point, we approve the minutes. We were a little behind on the minutes, and so we jumped ahead and we approved them, and they are now posted on the county website. But we approved them via email earlier today. So there is a record of our previous meetings on the county website if you're interested. I think I also already spoke about the upcoming vacancies that we have and how important it is to create a consensus, a place where people can bring issues, voice them, we can talk about them, we can pursue them, and then come up with the best way forward and advise the county council, because I have had a front row seat in the past when they did something rash. It was unreasonable, but they had not heard a better idea. So we're here to bring the best ideas forward. Let's start with hybrid versus in-person format. on the meetings going forward. We've been addressing that month by month. Right now, we are very grateful that Mary Ross has been continuing to host us on her Zoom account. Thank you very much. And we are wondering when is going to be the best time to go forward with a hybrid meeting format. I think I shared with the other committee members that I reached out to the fire department where we used to meet in person, and they are not ready to have in-person meetings there other than for training purposes. The only other solution I have right now, the church itself is not having in-person meetings for the most part and is not ADA accessible. And that kind of leaves, I think, the Grange, but they have a rental fee. So yes. And Mike, you had an idea?
Roland pointed out last meeting that the meeting room at Public Works is available, and there is a precedent for that. I just wanted to point that out. For meeting.
Would there be Zoom capabilities there, Roland?
At such time the county council opens up to public meetings, then it would be available. The room has been constructed, and we're having internal staff meetings there on a limited basis. But we were just instructed earlier this week that we're going to follow the council's lead, and until they open up for public meetings, we're as far as any public outreach that we do one-on-one, or it's through Zoom or GoToMeetings or Microsoft Teams. So it will be available. LIFAC, for the years that I've been involved, every 3 months, 4 months, whatever it was, you all met at the Civic Center. And once we're back into the swing of things, that will be available as well.
Okay, so hopefully sometime in the future, but not yet, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, the remodel is completed, but we're following the council's COVID protocols.
Okay. So I think the question is, do we want to take advantage of perhaps asking for a LICA grant to meet at the Grange? But would the Grange be a forum that would allow a hybrid setting, which I think we would want to continue as an option? Mike, you have an answer.
I think if you would make a call on behalf of LIFAC to Greg Hall, who's the president, last year when I was on the LICA, they came up with a new immediate grant policy in addition to the annual grant policy.
Okay, and is the Grange open for meetings yet, though?
Yes.
And do they provide simultaneous Zoom?
I don't know. Call to Greg would answer all that. I'm not sure. Thanks.
Okay, I'm happy to call Greg and find out more. So until that time, we will continue a Zoom format until we can find either an in-town or the Grange, unless there are other suggestions that come forward. Are we in agreement?
I'd just like to point out that more people have been attending our meetings when we had Zoom than when we were meeting in person. So I think that having something, finding a way to balance this so that the people who continue on Zoom are not isolated somehow, I think would be important. So I think it's fine to look into the Grange, but let's not have it, the Zoom participants sort of on a laptop in the corner.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, thank you. Usually at this time, we have the open session. I hope everybody is okay. I shuffled the agenda to put open session actually after we had a chance to hear reports from Rich and Roland. And that is a drum roll to ask Rich for his update report on ferry operations.
Yeah, you bet. Hi, Raymond. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Hello, other members of LIFAC. So I did prepare it's kind of a brief summary of the emergency outage that we experienced on October 8th. There was a lot that went on that day. So I've tried to break it down into sort of a digestible timeline with bullet points attached, and certainly be happy to answer any LIFAC member questions at the end of this. But I'll start by saying this. On October 28th at approximately 10:20 in the AM, Captain John Mulhern reported white smoke coming from the #1 main engine stack. At that same time, he also reported losing power to the point of sometimes stalling the engine. At that time, after John had alerted me, Captain Mulhern alerted the county mechanics at Public Works. Simultaneously, actually, Gary Poole, who is our ship's engineer, he happened to just be on board for a totally unrelated issue, not even an issue, just an unrelated reason. And so he was able to contact the marine mechanics at Tri-County Marine and get them on the way as well. We ran from 10:20, we ran sort of this modified service to get fuel trucks off the island and to also get all the school kids that are on the mainland back to Lummi Island, and the kids from Lummi Island back to the mainland. And fortunately, actually, it just happened to be a half day, so that was a real break in our favor. Meanwhile, while they were getting that done, I called Colony Wharf in Bellingham just to ensure that they had space that would accommodate our vessel. At 12:30 p.m., the mechanics from Whatcom County Public Works, as well as mechanics from Tri-County Marine, got on board the Whatcom Chief. About an hour later, so at 1:30, mechanics found a bent push rod, intake valve rocker hanging to the side of one of the valves, and estimated that repair would take at least 24 hours. That happened at 1:30. At 1:35, I called Elizabeth Cosa and asked her to begin the process of a proclamation of emergency, which would allow us to retain the services of primarily Colony, but also any other technicians in the area, or Seattle, or anybody that we needed. Let's see, so that was at 1:30, 1:35. At 1:40, I called Drew Schmidt, the owner of the Salish Sea, and informed him that I needed to enact our on-call emergency contract. And luckily, he was able to hop to it pretty quick, get his vessel fueled and ready for action. At 1:45, I called the central shop and kind of hit the go button on getting the floats installed to be able to accommodate that passenger vessel when it arrives. At 3:30, the Whatcom Chief headed for Colony Wharf with Tri-Mechanics and their tool vans both on board, and a full complement of crew to help assist. At 4:45, they arrived at Colony Wharf. Let's see, while repairs were underway and the floats were being installed, let's see, at 7:30 p.m., the floats are actually installed and the passenger vessel makes its first run. So I just wanted to highlight that because it's pretty incredible, I think, that from the time I made the call at 1:45 in the PM, at 7:30 p.m., the passenger vessel made its first run from Lummi Island. And for that to happen, we had to call folks from all over Public Works to come in and help facilitate that. So people got called back from vacation. I think people even came back from other leave and were able to get that done for us. Let's see. So then that evening, the mechanics worked all through the night. They tore down the whole engine. They replaced They bored out where the cam goes that runs the mechanical mechanism that runs the valving to the exhaust. They got the head put back on and all that. Probably by about, I think it was about 3 or 3:30 in the AM. At about 6 a.m. that next morning, I spoke with the owner of Tri-County Marine. He informed me that the failure that occurred in the engine was due to a faulty, like it's a retainer clip that holds the rocker arm and push rod assembly in place, and it had broke, allowing this engine failure to occur. So let's see, that occurred, and then that morning after they got the engine put back together, I asked him if he could ensure me that the other clips in our other main engine were going to retain their integrity enough to go back into service and provide us a reliable level of service. Of course, he said he didn't know. So at that time, I asked him to please send us another mechanic to tear down that engine and replace all those clips to ensure that it didn't happen again on the other engine. So that night, by the end of that night, which was the night of the 29th, all the engines were put back together and we were ready for startup and sea trials on the 30th at 7 a.m. So at 7 a.m., we started up, performed sea trials. After a few hours of that business and feeling confident that we were ready to be back into service, we called the central shop and they headed out to the ferry dock to pull the ramps. The last runs of the passenger vessel was 10 a.m. from Lummi Island, 10:10 a.m. from Gooseberry Point. And at which time they pulled the floats and the Whatcom Chief got back into service at approximately 2:20 p.m. So I know that's a lot of information. You guys have any questions about any of that business so far?
And I don't usually do this, but yeah, Charles.
Yeah, on these faulty retainer clips, just out of curiosity, are these something that age so that you replace all of them every other year or something on a regular replacement? Yeah. I mean, they wear and need replacement like other engine parts?
Yeah, so the previous year we did, so in the dry dock period or maintenance period of 2020, we did what's called a top end. And so during that top end, those clips were replaced. And so that's why this year in 2021, we were not due for a top end. We were due just for an main engine tune-up, which would have been replacing injectors and also gauging the valves and ensuring that they're opening to the right depth.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Along with a rear main seal, I believe, and a couple other things, but pretty basic stuff.
How old are the engines now?
The blocks themselves, I'd have to go back and look. I bet you they're probably about 10 to 12 years old, which sounds old, but in reality, they're not, as we take such great care of them and also have had them rebuilt. In fact, Mike Rusk, the owner of Tri-County, he's in Hawaii right now. He's getting back tomorrow. And sometime next week, I'm going to meet with him to discuss, this whole incident, and then also get perhaps adjusted recommendations on how we go forward with main engine maintenance.
You mentioned, I think, in the previous previous meeting that you were planning to put in new engines next year in 2020 or 2023, right?
Perhaps. Well, yeah, perhaps. That all depends on what Tri-County Marine, they're a certified cat dealer, what their recommendations are to us. If we're actually going to do that or not, I don't know. That's part of the conversation I'm going to have with Mike. And
how many more of these engines can we buy before they become unavailable because they no longer are manufactured? Yeah, that's a good question. So currently, right now, we have 2 brand new mains sitting at the county shop ready to be installed. And it's not so much, this is according to the experts at Tri-County Marine, it's not so much the blocks that are themselves that are difficult to find, and it's everything that goes on them, like the
like the injection pumps and everything else that bolts onto those blocks. Parts and pieces are becoming tougher to come by, according to them.
Jim,
Okay, the 3406 Caterpillar is one of the most reliable engines ever made. It's used in dump trucks, log trucks, excavators, dump grinders, boats. You name it, any kind of heavy bulldozers, any kind of heavy equipment. There were hundreds of thousands of them. Could be they can be rebuilt approximately 10 to 15 times over their lifespan. What happens is later in life, the bores start to the press-in bores of the cylinders start to walk around. They start to wear the bottom of the where they sit in the engine. But there's sleeves for that. I think there's 4 or 5 different ones. I'm willing to bet you could probably get 25 overhauls out of a block. I would suggest that over a period of time, we rat hole some parts for them, because the Whatcom Chief is not worth another set of brand new engines. Rebuild's fine, but you've got another set sitting in the shop. The ones that can be rebuilt, you can buy more. You can buy. The only suggestions I would have would get some of those wearing parts like camshafts, the followers, the rocker arms, that kind. Get one of each or 2 of each or something. Stick them on the shelves. They're available. You don't have to get new stuff. There's all kinds of it around. And new engines is really great, but $2 million is something that shouldn't be stuck in that boat. It's it's past its lifetime. So that's and I even have a 3406 in the log, 3404 in a log loader, which is a 4-cylinder version of the 6. And the 4, the 6, the 8, the 12, and the 16 all have common parts. So there's tons of them around.
okay, thank you. Rich, oh, I'm sorry, you had one other question?
Yeah, just to follow up. So you have new engines that would go in, say in 2023, maybe new blocks, and that would carry us through 2029. But in previous discussions, I've understood that 2029 was sort of the end date for this vessel because of either EPA regulations or because of the unavailability of these engines after that time. Is that still your view?
Well, again, that view is always going to be adjusted depending on Tri-County Marine's recommendations. Push the life of the chief out as long as we can, because at some point in time, if well, let me back up just a little bit. We rely on Tri-County Marine and their recommendations and their service because they're a certified Cat Marine dealer, and they've given us great service over the years. They've been taking care of the Whatcom Chief as long as I've been there, which is almost 26 years now. So again, what I'm hearing from them is let's try to push the life of these current engines out as far as we can responsibly without interrupting service, which just happened. That's why I want to make sure to have a conversation with the owner of Tri-County Marine, see if he wants to adjust his recommendations based on the service loss we just experienced. If he says, okay, I get it, let's put those new engines in that you have sitting out at the county shop, then we can bolt those in, and then we will begin cycling them through their life. At some point in time, those engines, those parts, the availability for them is just going to get tougher and tougher to come by. The tougher those parts are to come by, then our reliability starts to go down. And so then that's when we have to decide when to sort of cross that threshold into upgrading the engines with, Cat C15s with, that are all emissions regulatory and tier 3 engines. But that's quite a hurdle. And the reason that that's such a salient point in this conversation is that we can replace in kind any kind of equipment on the Whatcom Chief. The moment we change something as important as a main engine and main propulsion, we've got to run all that through the Marine Safety Center back in Washington, D.C. and get their approval for it. And that could be opening us up to a can of worms.
And
I hope
Rich, just to make sure, the current engines have been in place since when? How old are they?
I'd have to, I don't have, I apologize, I don't have that information with me. I think those blocks are somewhere between 12 and 15 years old right now.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you for that. Any other updates, Rich, that we need to be aware of?
Actually, I sent a document over to Mary Ross earlier this afternoon because I just wanted to pull up and share with you the cost breakdown for this emergency outage.
Thank you.
Mary, do you have that document to share by any chance? Very good, thank you. So what you'll see here is, first of all, the numbers in red indicate our estimates because we haven't actually processed an invoice for those services yet. Colony Wharf, Elizabeth and I agreed $10,000, we'd put that in there, knowing it's actually going to be quite a bit lower. I expect that number to be somewhere around $2,500. The reason we put $10,000 in there is because, as a placeholder, is there's a few other services that they may decide to bill us other than just space on their pier, depending on how they break down their costs to us. So at any rate, it's $10,000 as a placeholder. I think it's probably going to be more around $2,500. So the passenger only ferry, we did get invoiced for that. Came out to $11,536.94. Tri-County Diesel Marine, again, that number is in red because we have not been invoiced by those folks yet, but we estimate about $20,000 for that work. And then the rest of the charges in there are what it took to launch the floats and then also to pull the floats. And so basically what you're going to find once you add those numbers up is it cost us $18,669.67 worth of time and materials to get the floats in the water and to pull them back out. Passenger vessel, again, I said $11,536, and that's kind of where we're at with it. So it's somewhere in the neighborhood of a $60,000 outage.
Wow. Well, thank you for pulling those numbers together, and we will include them with the minutes. If you get up-to-date invoices within the next week or so, you'll forward those as well, update the information, please.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Rich, I have a quick question about the passenger-only ferry. It was in service for less than 24 hours, but is this what it costs? So say that's a day at $11,500. And but when it's running during dry dock, is it the same daily rate, more or less?
No, that's a different charge, and I don't have that contract right in front of me. But it was more than 24 hours. It was.
Okay, but my question is this an accelerated rate because of the short notice, or is this more or less what we pay on a daily basis for dry dock?
No, it's a different charge for emergency services. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Rich on this subject? Okay. What else do we need to know, Rich?
I guess the one last thing I would note as far as the cost of the outages, we were able to absorb it into this year's budget, fortunately, because we've taken such good care of the budget this year. So we did not have to ask for additional funds to be drawn directly out of the ferry fund for this emergency.
That's good.
I guess the last thing I wanted to note when it comes to this outage and the others that we've had is it's kind of funny actually, but I started looking at all of our ridership and whatnot, and started really thinking about how much we work the Whatcom Chief and sort of what the expectation is around that. Right now, between maintenance periods, the Whatcom Chief does a year about 12,000 round trips a year, which is 24,000 crossings. And given that each crossing is a mile, that's 24,000 miles in between our maintenance periods. Just so happens that the circumference of the Earth is 24,850 miles. So the Whatcom Chief goes all the way around the planet, almost, in between dry docks.
Can we stop in Singapore?
I would love to. The only problem with that is that might sound like a fun trip, but the reality is the way in which we need to operate the Whatcom Chief is that would look like us pulling out of Lummi Island, pulling the ferry boat all the way up to speed. So it's going full speed for a 10-minute period, maybe 5 minutes, and then throttling down in full reverse, stopping, wait there for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then do it all over again, all the way around the globe. That's what we're doing with that ferry boat every year. That's really tough on equipment. I don't think I'd want to take that trip. That doesn't sound like very much fun.
Okay.
Rich, can I just ask, while you're on that subject, I know that because of COVID, we've had different schedules and so forth, but what is the daily number of round trips currently?
Boy, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 36 or 37 round trips.
Okay, thanks.
And Rich, are we going to have an overall look at the budget at our meeting maybe next month to see how ferry fares are doing? How is the budget doing for this year? Yeah,
the budget this year is looking it's looking pretty good for this year. It was looking really good until we had this emergency outage, unfortunately, but we are still intact and looking good to get us through the end of the year.
Okay. What else do we need to be updated on here? There's been actually more than that one outage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's why I just wanted to highlight to you all and also to the community just what that piece of equipment experiences over the course of an entire year. And we've had kind of a tough 4 or 5 months as far as outages having to do with our steering system. And then of course this engine outage, breakdown outage, that was a tough one. We've been able to provide a really great level of service, and this last 4 or 5 months has not been a good example of that. But what it is a good example of is when you take a boat that was built in 1962, and then over the course of the last 7 years, update every single major system in that vessel, there's bound to be sort of these unexpected consequences. Like we didn't know the rudder feedback units would not do well in the environment that they're in. So currently we're working on a plan to either locate them remotely in the engine room. We're also working on a plan to provide a backup manual steering system. So if it fails, we can hopefully continue service. There's other things we can do. We're going to continue to take great care of our engines as well as the rest of the vessel so that we can provide that sort of round the world experience in between our maintenance outages. And the last thing I would like to say about all of that, I guess, is that, in the last 4 or 5 months, just looking at some of the community response, there's a big majority of our community that's really supportive and really understanding, and that's a really wonderful thing. It's also okay for the rest of the community to really expect and sort of demand that round the world every year service. That's okay too, and totally understood. But it dawned on me that we've had such a turnaround in population here in the last 4 or 5 years or so that I feel sort of, well, not sort of, I feel obligated to share a message with you and the rest of the community, which probably won't be a popular one. But what it is that, you know, quite possibly if you own or operate a business on Lemmy Island, your business advisor wouldn't know to tell you that you're choosing to run a business on an island that is, its only mode of transportation is one piece of equipment. It's not a bridge, and it's going to fail from time to time. I would also like to say that to anyone that's bought a house here in the last several years or bought property, it's going to happen. And it's not fun for any of us. It's not fun for business owners. It's not fun for landowners or folks that own a home here, but it's bound to happen. And the reality is when that new vessel that we're wishing so much to bring into service comes trucking up the pass of Hales Passage to take over the place of the Whatcom Chief, it's going to break down too from time to time. So again, this message for me is it's not from a place of feeling defensive. It's really from a place of feeling responsible to provide that message, because I don't think there's anybody else that's going to. So that's all I have on that.
Nobody wants to hear that, Rich.
No.
We very much respect your saying it. I think this is,
Absolutely.
and I think the example of this stop-start trip around the world really brings it home in a new way for many people. So thank you for saying that all.
You're welcome.
Jim.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, Jim, you had your hand up.
Yeah, a couple things. We know this is going to happen. And if the Whatcom Chiefs any measure what's going to happen when we get a new boat, we better keep it tied up, the Whatcom Chief tied up, because the Whatcom Chief was literally running on one engine, which they won't allow anymore, about 50% of his time for the first 2 or 3 years. You couldn't get in the second passenger space because it was full of engine parts. You can still see the oil stains on the seats, but it's very much right about whatever new ferry we get, it's going to have some teething problems. The other thing I was going to say was that one thing I want to do, I see now, Richard, your numbers of $60,000 are fine for you, but you do not take into account the lost revenue or the costs of the Islanders. And I mean, you can kind of guess at it, but that's about it. So I think that we need to keep a reserve ferry that can be here in an hour. And I'm willing to head that subcommittee to work on that, because that's, it's going to be needed. And I will agree with Rich. The Whatcom Chief has been absolutely stellar. It has been. It's just getting old, and we can't keep running it. It's past its duty cycle. It was originally designed for 30 years. It's well past that. It's time it became probably a reserve ferry. And the other thing is that I would take it in a minute over Skagit counties for our use.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I love it, Jim. Thank you.
Skagit County's current ferry.
Me too.
The Whatcom Chief is way more reliable than it is. It also has more freeboard, and it's better in bad weather.
Okay. Well, thank you for offering to look into that. That was the next thing to talk about, was emergency outage planning. And Jim, I hear you saying you would like to focus some of your time and attention on looking at that further. I would appreciate that. I think we're all interested in what else? What are the other options other than, I do want to say, Rich, I was impressed with that quick turnaround. I was there for, I think, that first 720 or whatever passenger ferry service and saw the crew that put the ramps and everything in place. And it was a lot of people. Yeah, it took a lot of effort. So Jim, I would look forward to hearing that. I would like to, I think it would be appropriate. I don't see Chris Emmer on here yet. Dave Perry, did you want to just give us a quick update on emergency planning options that you had a look at? And is there a report from that other committee that Chris Emmer has been chairing?
Okay, Rama, since you put me on the spot, I'll go on video here. I know some of you, but not many of you. And I didn't prepare any remarks for this meeting, so forgive me if I'm not following protocols or anything else, but
well, yeah, I would just say let's keep it to a few minutes here, but if there's an update, I do know LIFAC wants to be able to complement whatever work you've been able to, or progress you've been able to make.
Okay, so let me just share with you this. So the Public Dock Committee has a short-term goal to explore options to provide urgent need access to the mainland when there is a temporary ferry outage, right? On topic of what we're discussing now. But the long-term goal of the committee is to investigate working with Whatcom County Parks and Recreation Department to establish a public dock that provides recreational boat access to and from the island. Okay, and those, the reasons for those are not mutually exclusive, right? I think we all agree that if we had a dock available on this island for recreational boaters, and I'm one of those boaters, that's why I'm on this committee. I have on occasion ferried some people across to Gooseberry in times of need. So I think that the long-term goal is there. We have a number of people on this committee that are researching other projects that have occurred around, say, the San Juan Islands and looking into funding sources for projects of this nature. I think there's an opportunity there and there are funds there. So I'm encouraged that as a long-term goal that could be accomplished, but this is still early days in the committee, right? The flip side is the need for immediate services, say, if there's a ferry outage like we just experienced. And I would like to give kudos to Rich and the ferry crew and Public Works Department, the team there in this recent outage that I think it was, what, 6 hours, Rich? You said that the docks were reconfigured, the passenger ferry was put in place. And I think that's fantastic. But I also have heard from other folks that, you know, in the past, I don't know, 18 years or so, there's only been a couple of occasions where the passenger ferry was put in service, maybe because the outages were of shorter nature and it didn't make sense or financial sense to do that. So I think from my perspective, we need to distinguish between emergency transfer of people from the island to the mainland for, say, a mission critical, life critical emergency where the fire department would play a role. I think many of us have, you know, Airlift Northwest and various services like that we've secured insurance with to get off the island in a medical emergency. But there are other reasons people need to get across that are not life-threatening and wouldn't qualify for that, right? So wouldn't it be nice if there was a means for private individuals, say, to be able to pick up people and transfer them across? Now, I know Chris Emmer has a landing craft. That's great. It's very convenient. It's not perfect. There are limited landing zones. I myself have a small boat that I could beach and load people on But let's face it, we are a naturally occurring retirement community of older people. Right? And for people to clamber over a boat from a beach or from a dinghy into a boat can be problematic. So I think that's the motivation to do a long-term plan, like put in a recreational dock, which I'm in favor of. In the other areas and to address the short-term goal, I think this committee is trying to solicit input. I've heard from some folks that maybe we could come up with some kind of plan to engage a water taxi service that could be immediately responsive versus reconfiguring the ferry docks at Gooseberry and Lummi, for example. So I think I'll just leave it at that in the spirit of trying to be brief. I think you understand what the motivation is. And we're just trying to come up with solutions to address a short-term and a longer-term need.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And stay in touch. And I have some other thoughts I'll call you with later. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Dave, can I just ask a question? There are water taxi services based on out in the San Juan Islands that say they will come and pick people up off of Lummi, and so forth. Have you looked at them at all, water taxi services?
I think we're investigating some of those services. I think Mary Ross may have some comments on that later. We're looking at any other potential options that maybe could provide easier access for people to load onto private boats. I mean, there's a lot of complicating issues here, right, with potential liabilities and this and that. So
right.
We're open to ideas and suggestions, and we have our own. And I think there are we have our more or less weekly meetings, and those are available on the website on LICA. So I think for the purposes of LIFAC, there are some specific ideas that we would like to share with LIFAC that would address the short-term needs of transporting people across. Right.
Okay, I would welcome synthesizing those into, a couple of bullet points and putting you on the agenda next month if it's ready for presentation. So thank you for the update.
Okay.
And thank you for your work on it. I love it. Okay. And are you the best person to contact, or who is the point person?
I would say that Chris is the chair of the committee, so he would be the best to contact. I'm happy to provide any input, but
so noted. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Okay. And Jim, you already made the point about emergency planning in the future and perhaps use of the what from chief.
Yeah.
If everybody's ready, let's move on to any update on that local weather station that John Mulhern has been looking at, and there's possible funds from Northwest Clean Air for any update on that, Rich?
I've had my hands full. I have not been able to spend any time tracking down the weather station.
Okay. Anything else on your report? Mike.
John Mulhern sent me notice that he found a second source that would cover the rest of the cost, but it still would be some incidental costs, and has asked me to apply for a grant with LICA to cover those costs.
Wow, that sounds hopeful. Thank you. Okay, and you're going to apply for a grant for that then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Roland, time for your report. Do you have an update for us?
Hey, Rama, really quick.
Yeah.
I'm gonna sign off.
Well, I'm going to make you watch the recording afterwards of the open session in case we have comments. We will have comments, but okay.
I will watch and pay attention to those comments.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you, Rick.
being here.
Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Rich.
You bet. Thank you, Charles. Good night, you guys.
Okay.
Good night. Oh, Rich, oops, he's gone.
Anything specifically, Charles, that I can answer that you were going to ask? Rich?
No, I just wanted to have him convey our thanks to the crew for their extraordinary work, and also Public Works in getting the ferry back into service as quickly as they did. So I'll send him a note,
Certainly.
but please convey that to all of your colleagues in Public Works who were manning cranes and finding spare parts in wind and bad weather and dark of night, and we appreciate it.
Well, one of the things Rich doesn't know, and I meet with the bridge crew and the mechanics every Tuesday morning to go over different issues. That was one terrible week for them. They were working on a couple of different bridges, some guardrails, and they were exhausted. And then they got the call from Rich, and they still turned around and got everything done. It's wonderful to watch those people work out there. Their commitment to the community, which is all of Public Works. And a couple days later, in fact, they're up there now racing up to Point Roberts to work on a seawall that was damaged in a very terrible car wreck. So they are true first responders, even though they're not mending bones. They are first responders to the infrastructure. I wanted to let you know, I sent Rama, make sure you got it, a copy of the County Road Administration Board grant application.
Oh,
You got it. I tried to send it to the Lummi Ferry Google group, but it bounced back the next day. It's too large. So next week, I will see if I can have someone put it on the website. We've had 3 different administrators retire recently, and so the people that know how to get everything on the website are absent. And as you can tell by this silver hair on me, I'm not one of those people. So the people that are in the know are not me. So, but
I think I got it, and I forwarded it.
You got it. I don't know if you forward it to all your colleagues, but the Google site that we send it to normally to get the whole email list, it bounced back because it was so large. It was like 16.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah.
Yes, huge. But I will tell you, it was received. Steve Johnson with the County Road Administration Board staff reviewed it. Very, very impressed. He can't say for sure because, of course, it's not his decisions, but it is, in his words, the best application he's seen. So we're very proud of KPFF and the work that's done by your team here at Public Works to looking for that funding. That's the status of that. So what happens is it is now goes into the system. The staff or the administration of the County Road Administration Board reviews it. It gets forwarded to the legislature for their next biennium. And so it's not in this coming budget cycle, I think it's in the 2023-24 budget cycle. So we're right on time. We're right within the time period that is established by the Washington Administrative Code. The WAC sets when we have to do things. We had to the end of the year to get it in. We got it in the 1st of November. So we're good to go, in line. And we hear nothing but positive things about the application. So I would like to thank Mike and all of you that pushed your community to send letters and emails to Senator Murray, Cantwell, Delbeni, and Larson. I heard from Senator Cantwell's office this week And through the chain, they forwarded back one of the emails, a very personal story by one of your community members talking about that, so much of infrastructure makes things more convenient, more reliable, and that's all well and good. And shortening people's commute time is a wonderful thing. But this vessel is a part of emergency services, and it's the only one we got. And so how important it is. And she provided a couple of examples that were very heartfelt. And clearly every person that read this email has been involved. So her chief of staff is involved, her grant writer is involved, or grant coordinator is involved, and the representative of the Northwest counties of the state is involved, Cameron Caldwell. And Cameron and I are speaking next week for more details. They're aware the RAISE grant is sitting in the DOT hopper, moving its way through. And Senator Cantwell has promised to do a follow-up letter to bring attention to the secretary of how important it is. Even though we've got one attached to the application, she's willing to do a follow-up letter to really bring this home. And that wouldn't happen if the community wasn't so involved in pleading your own case. In being involved with public works and these types of issues for over 3 decades, it's very rare that an entire community gets involved. Infrastructure is usually a pretty boring thing with a bunch of engineers sitting around and seeing which way the scales fall. Well, this one has this many average daily trips, and so it's bigger than that one, so let's fund that one. People that usually don't get into the human factor and the human cost, which you all have provided. That's a long way of saying we're very hopeful, but we'll see what happens, where the ink falls on the paper, and see what happens. If we're not successful this time, we will apply again.
Oh, Roland, bite your tongue. We'll be successful.
We will be successful. We are acting as if it's impossible to fail. That's the only way to go through this. And being involved with several multi-million-dollar projects from the county, it's timing. It's not an if, or it's not an if, it is a when.
Do we know when we might hear any kind of estimate in the end of this month, early December, or anything before the end of the year? Any estimate?
Yeah, before the end of the year. I thought I read on the website that it was going to happen before December 11th or something like that. And I looked on the website, or someone else had looked on the website this morning, and they couldn't find any notice on date. So they may have pulled that time period that off, but we'll be following up on that to find out. And of course, the minute we hear, we'll be sending out notice to you all. And when it's successful, you will hear it from my office. So I will be yelling loud enough so you will all be able to hear across the bay.
But Roland, we can still continue to call, leave messages, and keep writing heartfelt letters. It's
absolutely.
Okay.
Rain upon the District of Columbia. Give them a good old-fashioned Whatcom County rain. Make sure that the Department of Transportation and everybody in DC understand. It's really nice that you all talked about $1 billion of infrastructure. This is where it's needed, been needed, and let's get past the politics and start writing a check.
Well, and
is it true that they write any of these, or should we focus on Secretary Buttigieg, or on the 2 senators, or on our representative, or all of the above?
All.
Okay.
I don't see a downside myself. I sat down with our attorney and went through all of my previous actions and what I've done, and he's willing to defend me as far as lobbying, because there's a specific RCW and federal laws that state that staff cannot lobby on behalf of a project or a community. And however, we can provide information. And so what I have done is provide information on how important this actually is. So, but I have been cautioned to, not send letters myself. Public Works cannot send the letters on your behalf. What you're doing through the message that Mike sent out a month ago, 6 weeks ago, whatever it was, Mike, that really, if you continue that, people who haven't had the time to do it, there's still time.
I should add that yesterday I got a letter from the Undersecretary of the Department of Transportation, and I think our other LIFAC members did too, but individually addressed, acknowledging our letter. And then most of it was about the raised grant and how much money it's given away and so forth. So at least that's registered bureaucratically, just for your information. But Mike has done a great job in helping us get templates out. And I hear you're saying we just need to do this again.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it is not an exaggeration of how important the whole previous hour has been talking about emergency services and the need for having that ferry to be reliable. And it's not just tourism dollars. We're talking about quality of life and life itself. And so that's not an exaggeration. That's true and straight up. Letting them know that from people who live there is more important than some engineer like myself filling out the form and saying, yeah, it affects this many people and this is who it will serve.
Okay, thank you. Mike.
I have I have a plan in place for another letter blitz, and I will send that to the committee members soon. An outline of how we'll put it out there again it's time to blitz. Okay. I love your term.
Okay.
Let's be rainmakers in a different way than the usual term.
And Charles.
Can I just add, just for many of our recent participants tonight, the dollar amounts are the Federal Department of Transportation raised grant is $20 million. The CRAB is $10 million. That's the County Roads Appropriation Board, against the $33 million total project costs. Could you just take a minute and tell us all about the status of the remaining $3 million?
The remaining $3 million has been committed by Public Works and the executive. I'll back up a little bit. From the County Road Administration Board grant is $10 million, but it's $10 million over 20 years. It's $500,000 a year is what we're really being approved for. So we'll be taking out a loan for the other 3, and actually that 10, and whether it comes from the Public Works Trust Fund, which is possible at a 0.25% interest, or there are other conversations well beyond me about the county's own treasury. I heard it say that we take in taxes and then we send the taxes off to a big bank in New York, and then we make a fraction of a percent of money on that, and then we ask a loan and we're having to pay prime rate for a loan. Well, what if we just don't send as much back and we charge our own self the piddlance of percentage that we get, instead of having to ask an underwriter to do it? And so the executive's office is looking into that. Perhaps Councilmember Donovan may have other information, because those conversations were well beyond me.
I'll just say, if we get the 2 grants, it's so much easier to find any path forward than if we don't. When we were talking about this a couple of years ago, it's a whole different ballgame if we can get those. I don't want to say it's easy to finish the last 3 million or whatever, but it's a lot easier if that's the amount of money we're talking about, and not 26 million or whatever it was before.
Right. So that that kind of brings a close to the whole level of service conversation that I began with. The grant application was the last thing on my to-do list. So not only are a couple of you moving forward, I'm moving on to other projects with Public Works. And I will still be involved with any other grant applications and that sort of thing, and follow up from any of the congressional or legislative questions. I'll be involved with that. I will come back to LIFAC for specific presentations or specific questions with regard to the overall public process. But I am essentially bidding you all good luck, and I will see you hopefully on the island on occasion. And I just want to thank you all for being such a vibrant, and all, including Nancy and Pat and all the others, Mike Skihan and everybody who's been involved with all of this for so long. It's been quite the ride that I've been involved with. And so thank you all, and I will say adieu.
Aw, we'll miss you, Roland. Oh, Chris, did you have final words for Roland?
Waving goodbye.
You've been just what we needed, Roland, and I'm so grateful for your expertise with moving big projects forward, both in front of the county council and also with the congressional delegation as appropriate, and helping us wordsmith everything. And I appreciate it very much.
Certainly.
Thank you, Roland.
Yes.
All right.
And we expect you to come back in December with a big announcement. So we're not saying goodbye yet. We know you have a loud voice, but you can amplify it by coming back to our meeting.
You've been great. Thank you. We'll miss you.
Thank you
Okay.
all.
So is that it? That's it. Okay.
No, we've skipped the shore par.
Oh,
that one, yeah. So as I mentioned last time,
thank you, Charles.
there is the county executive has asked that you send a representative, and I believe that Charles perhaps, to discuss with that. There are several conversations that I'm not aware of. I was just told that there's a big conversation going on right now with regard to climate change. I think there's a staff person that's being discussed. I don't know the details. I was just informed that that request for the shore power study is likely to be handled someone other than me or Liz or Rich. More likely to be handled by a different person. So that is something that the county executive has asked for a member of LIFAC to represent this, to call Tyler Schroeder, who is the deputy county executive, and he's expecting your call, and he will coordinate your request in amongst the other group of things. And again, maybe Councilmember Donovan has additional information that I'm unaware of.
Well, let me, if I may, just jump in briefly. First of all, to thank you, Roland, and also to update many of the people here tonight. In August, LIFAC made a recommendation to County Council to close the knowledge gap in terms of we're getting a ferry that can run on electricity, but we have no way of charging it from the shore. So it will run purely on internal battery power generated by the onboard diesels until such time as we can figure out how to get enough power to the dock. So the design at present, I've called it, it's an electric boat with a plug but no socket. And so the shore power study is to look at the alternatives for how to get enough power. And I won't go into all of the details other than it's true that in 2018, our founding county council resolution that authorized this ferry did so with the justification of a carbon neutral goal, that is net zero goal for the new ferry. And also recognizing that the chief by itself, the current ferry, represents over 15% of the county government's total vehicle carbon emissions, making it the largest single vehicular emitter in the county fleet and the second largest carbon emitter in facilities owned by the county of any kind. So it's sort of, for the climate change ferry carbon reduction, is sort of the ultimate low-hanging fruit. But we have that problem of the last mile, or rather the last few feet, how to plug the ferry into the dock and get power. So the resolution called on, recommended the county council ask the Public Works to carry out such a study. And we also recognize, after a session with Puget Sound Energy, that any change in electrical equipment has a long lead time, maybe 5 years. So we thought it was time to have the study done in the next 2 years, so that we would know the answers to the questions: how much power, from where, and how will it get on the boat by the time the ferry comes in service, hopefully in 2026. Otherwise, the ferry will run on diesel, and it will actually use more diesel than the current chief. We learned that from Rich at an earlier meeting that the Whatcom chief in the peak summertime uses 180 gallons of diesel a day. Elliott Bay Design Group, the marine architects who did the specs for the new ferry, came up with this table that said that at the same number of 34 crossings a day, the diesel battery system would require 253 gallons, and the conventional diesel would 288. So clearly it's going to be more diesel than the chief is burning. And the question is how to reduce it. So just to, Jim, let me finish and then you'll. So we feel that this is the missing piece. And this afternoon, Rema and I and Todd talked about arranging to talk with the county executive, just as Roland has recommended. Todd, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just a couple things, and Roland kind of touched on this. The executive is proposing, back up, the council just approved the climate action plan last night, which does mention the chief and the goals of reducing emissions. The executive, the plan also proposes having an Office of Climate Implementation. I can't remember what it's called. And the executive's proposal is to put somebody in natural resources and public works to do that, and then have a strategic initiative person in his office that coordinates that position, a couple other positions. Those are just proposals right now, but I think what and when we meet with the deputy executive, we can maybe get some more follow-up on this. But the things that are in that resolution about shore power, it sounds, and I'm only getting the secondhand. I've heard firsthand about South Paul's idea for this position, but I haven't heard about like how they would respond to the shore power study. But all of these things that involve the climate action plan implementation are going to kind of be pooled to whoever this new position is. So we'll learn more when we talk to the executive and the deputy executive. Last thing, so the governor just signed an executive order 2 days ago to say that the state's transportation fleet should be fully electrified by 2035. But I don't think it included the ferries in that. It's just, vehicles, trucks, and all that stuff. But that gives kind of further inertia to accommodating batteries and plugging in for the new chief. At that, so we're gonna. We also Raymond, Charles and I talked about also, how do we get PSE interested in, or at least kind of getting this on their radar screen, regardless of what the county's doing. The need for power for the potential modified ferry. The last thing, Roland, I got to say, I've been doing this for I think since I got on council like 6 years ago, something this is the, I think that the best work I've ever seen staff and an advisory committee do in terms of a working relationship. So I just want to kudos to Roland for the work you've done on this.
Absolutely.
And the working relationship has just been pretty amazing. I'll just say that.
Thank you.
And Todd, you've been reelected. Are you going to re-up with us in January or?
Yeah, probably. It's up to the council. I mean, I'll probably put in to do it. Although the minute I get off, the grant will come through, and then you know things will start moving forward, right? So
Well, you don't want to miss that. Okay. Anyway, you have been stellar. We've had great support, and I appreciate everything you've done in guiding us. And I look forward to talking to Tyler with you. So next step. Okay.
Jim had a comment.
Right, Jim.
Really.
Okay, now I've done the study on the fuel use of things. And we have Mr. Fox managed to get us a set of drawings of the Texas ferries in Galveston. And the hull design is virtually identical to the one that Elliott Bay gave us. It has a tremendous amount of wetted surface. And from their numbers, we're going to be looking at an awful lot of fuel in this new boat.
And Jim, I'm sorry Rich isn't here, but before this meeting, he confirmed that you and Liz Cosa and I are going to sit down and look at your numbers probably next week or the following week. You said you might be gone. Okay.
But I want to say this for the other people in LIFAC and that.
Okay.
The Texas ferry, the diesel ferry, averaged out at 10 gallons an hour per 100. And let's just use a 19-day hour. That's about what we have here. 19-hour day, excuse me. That's $190 a day, 190 gallons a day. The Whatcom Chief on the yearly non-peak season is 145, 142 actually. I'm just rounding off to 145. For instead of 10, it's 7.63 gallons an hour average. I computed the and now we go to the diesel electric ferry that Texas had. They're burning 27 gallons an hour, which is $513 gallons in a 19-hour day. I think Elliott Bay's, will it be 10 gallons an hour or will it be 27? It's going to be somewhere in between. That's my opinion. But what I'm saying is this is due to the hull design. We need the hull redesigned.
Okay.
A simple V hull. Just for example, when I did the work in the Hayou, we came out with 130 gallons a day at 6.89 gallons an hour. And that's a very heavy tank of a boat, by the way, but it's a V hull. It has less, there's more things I could say about that, but it's far lower drag. It's more like a sailboat. If you ever,
okay. So Jim, we will have a meeting with Liz. This committee cannot change that design, but that's why we need to take it up a notch, and we will do that, okay? Because these are important numbers that we need to be very aware of. She needs to be aware of, and we will make that happen, okay? But I don't think we cannot make a change right now with what's in the application, but you can create awareness, and we are going forward with creating awareness with the correct people. So I appreciate that.
I want to put one more mark in here.
Okay.
That we have to, I'm looking out for the community here. I'm looking out for our pocketbooks. I'm looking out for everything. That if we end up with a ferry like this, we're going to have at least $1 more per trip on to billing to the people. That's at least. And so that's just, designers love to make things, and sometimes they make things that may not have their customers' best intentions. And that's what I'm trying to do. We're gonna have this thing for a long time.
We probably will. Let's hope we can get it. But I hear your point. Okay, Mike, you had a thought.
Yeah, Jim, also for the folks here that are in the gallery, I wanted to say that those things you just said are in the last month's minutes, and I would invite them all to go onto the Public Works website on our page on that and check those minutes out, because it's interesting material.
Okay.
I'd like to say one thing more. I think just in Raymond and I think it should be included too. I guess we have to dodge the quorum issue, but anybody else on LIFAC that would like to go to that thing, I think that would be a good idea.
Okay, appreciate that. I'd like to, I don't want this to go on too long. I'd like to move on to the agenda item, the naming, next steps. Where do we stand on that? Jim, Mike?
Mary, would you put up the document, and I'll go through it very quickly, and I'll be sending this document out to the committee tomorrow. Mary, are you there? Mary Ross. There we go. Yeah, here's an outline of the ferry name suggestions. Got approval from a commitment from the LIFAC community website, ourlemmiisland.org, to build form or forms if we choose, and to host that initiative. You know, and then below that is just some ways to get that word out to people to suggest names. The forms would be customized to collect specific information. There's some examples of that. And there could be any or all of these examples. The form is very flexible and really countless ways to use it. Responses would remain anonymous except for an automatic email to LIFAC, and unavailable for viewing online. Entries can have a limit of any number from one limit suggestion or, you know, infinity if we like. These are things we need to discuss as a committee. Set a deadline for the entries. And then I listed the 5 entities that I've created a letter or email to send to for their specific suggestions, and that is the public one and ours, and then County Council, Public Works, and the ferry crew. I've got an email prepared to send to those. And I wanted to ask you, Todd, should I send that just to you, or should I send it to each council member?
I guess you could send it to each one. I don't think it matters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then LIFAC, the last point is LIFAC will gather and select top submissions and submit those to County Council for a decision.
Okay, and you will, is that an updated document? Can you send that to all of us on LIFAC so we're all on the same page?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, because I think there's a couple of updates from the last time I saw that, but any discussion on what Mike is proposing in terms of naming here? Any other?
Just a brief one. When you send it out, could you just put a date on it so we're all working from the same document? Mike, it occurred to me, I maybe should have thought of this earlier. Should we have any sort of general criteria to stimulate people's imagination, like, I don't know, geographical names, historical names, something that will help whoever ends up winnowing it down to a short list to sort of be clear, you know, what are categories of names that will work and categories that may not be as compelling?
Short answer is yes, and that'll be part of the discussion that's outlined in this.
Okay.
In this document.
Where will that take place in this document? The setting of criteria.
Forms will be customized to collection of specific information, and there are several examples. One of the examples would be citing a reason for your choice. So,
Okay,
but that's
great.
part of the discussion that we'll have. And there hasn't been a previous document. There was just a rough idea last time. This is actually a specific plan based
Okay.
on commitment.
Okay,
from-
thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you. Thank you for moving this forward. And again, I think I have heard from Roland and others that it's not time sensitive, but I think it's important to keep it moving, and let's, thank you very much, Mike. Public awareness, this is an opportunity to say thank you, Charles, for leading the meeting 2 months ago, and when I was not able to, and putting up with me conducting the meeting from the car last time. Anything's possible. So I will take the lead on the Tome article unless somebody else wants to, based on tonight's meeting and the information we've heard. And Mike, you're kind of taking the lead on getting information out there on the ourLummi Island.org website for us, correct?
That is correct. Also, just a reminder, Rayma, that this is the last tome of the year. There's no tome in December, so be thinking ahead for any message that we want to make clear by by January.
Okay, good point. Thank you. Good reminder.
Rayma, I'd be happy to look at a draft if you find that beneficial.
I will share it around. Okay.
Okay.
I would thank you very much. I'm leaving open session here to the end, and I don't usually do that, but
One other thing before we move on to open session, just for the minutes or whatever, I'll be happy to follow up with Todd and yourself on the question of the meeting with the county executive.
I count on that. Okay, thank you. I'm leaving open session to the end, and I thank you all for staying around. I have received 2 items, hard copy in the mail, well, hard copy email. One was from Jerry Brown, Islander, who was suggesting that the current surcharge on ferry fares is the fact that it's just $1 a fare that we approved and council sent to council, and it is our skin in the game for this ferry replacement project, to say Islanders are paying their part as we go forward looking for funding from other sources. And Jerry's point was that $1 a fare is not equitable, that the needs-based fares are hit with $1 just like trucks are, but we had a good discussion about it, and I want to make sure, Mike, that it is part of the minutes and included as open session comments. I also got an email that I shared with you all from Noelle Marr, and she was basically suggesting something I haven't heard suggested for a while. She says, I've noticed many trucks and businesses are having to wait in long ferry lines. Crystal with the FedEx truck is just exhausted. Why can't some of these trucks go to the front of the line? Which is a comment we haven't been hearing, but for those of us who are in lines and watching the trucks that got caught in the last ferry outage, it's like, and knowing what it means to businesses that do service the island, I thought it was very interesting that she was talking about creating some sort of let those trucks go to the front of the line. That's not something we've talked about, and if there's any interest in it, I'm happy to put it on the agenda for next month to see if there are any ideas that come forward in the meantime on that. So those were 2, and we'll include that in the minutes as open session. Are there others who would like to speak in our open session up to 3 minutes? Yes, Tom Philpott.
Yes, at the day that we all got together at the Saturday market and learned more about the ferry, there were a number of people that were asked, or we were all asked to submit names for the new vessel. And they were written down on little pieces of paper. It occurs to me that people have already submitted their input. They may not go to the website to do that a second time. And I think those should be compiled and made available as suggestions. And second thing on the ferry fares, the dollar surcharge, totally inequitable. What you should do is, if you're going to do levy $1 on cars, a car and driver, you should take that same percentage and level that against the heavy duty vehicles. Having them pay $1 is stupid. It's not realistic. They should pay a percentage. What do they pay? Is it 30 some dollars? It's not based on weight, which is another inequity. So anyway, my input, 3 minutes.
Okay, so you agree with Jerry Brown? Is okay?
Yeah.
Thank
Quick
you.
comment, Tom, those names have been gathered and organized, and this is just a second round. So they're all included.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good point. Jim, you have
Um,
something in open session?
What I want to make that the needs-based fares did not raise. They stayed, we didn't raise them.
Oh, thank you for catching that. Okay,
And student fares, we didn't raise them either.
good point. Right. So, no,
I should say, we didn't recommend the county council raise them. We only recommended $1 surcharge for the reasons you said. And Tom's point is simply, and the letter writers is simply that the higher categories like trucks should be prorated so they pay more.
thank you for that. Okay. Other comments? Mary?
Okay, my 3 minutes. I was blessed to be a part of up close and personal 2 more ferry outages. And I just really want to keep pushing for LIFAC and the county to come up with a faster response. I'm sorry, but Richie said, and I watched the response because I was sitting on Gooseberry at 12:15 that day to try to come home. And I agree that they really did that really quickly. It was really, really quickly. But you also, and Rich said it was only like 5 hours, but it wasn't 5 hours or 5.5 hours, because the ferry went down at around 10 something. So we're talking, there was 8 hours that people could not get home or get off the island. And there is a cost there. And the other part that really struck home to me this time was seeing when I finally came home on Friday, because I made the choice to stay in town. But when I was at the dock, I watched the docks roll in and all that stuff. And so I have a couple of suggestions that I think could be done better during an outage. The first is, I think there needs to be somebody talking to the cars as they drive up. After John Mulhern walked the line for immediately telling us that, well, you might as well go back into Bellingham because the ferry is going to be out. We will be implementing passenger service and it will start this evening sometime. And it was a good, clear message, but then there was nobody up there answering questions. And so it's kind of a semi-chaos frustration thing. I had people, I was talking to some people in the lines and stuff. And I had people from the Willows just asking, well, where can we park? Can we just park here in this parking lot here and or over at the store? And so, you know, it's like there's a lot of people who don't get next door who aren't islanders that are impacted by it on the mainland side. So I think that could be done better in future, during future outages. The other thing that I really thought about is I saw a lot of comments on Nextdoor offering rides to people to the, you know, home from the dock once the passenger only service started. One thing I didn't see is I didn't see any response to all of those people who were working on the island that day and who got stuck on the island, whose trucks were stuck on the island. You know, and some of them, there was I have heard an anecdote that somebody had to end up sleeping in his truck all night. There is no restaurant on the island right now. There is no hotel on the island. So all of those folks were stuck, and maybe we as an island need to come up with an emergency response to at least treat those people who do serve us and help us out and fix our appliances, install things, build things for us. If something like this happens again, I think we need to be aware of and take care of those folks. It may not be LIFAC's job, but I think it's an island job.
Okay, I thank you for that.
Mhm.
I appreciate, I agree with that because I saw those trucks, yeah. And
yeah. And last point is, I think that there's got to be a better way. I do really want to consider, I spoke for a long time with Richie yesterday. You know, that outage, it was over $20,000 just to set those docks in place. And it's a lot of time, it takes a lot of time to do it. I would really like to encourage the county to explore maybe an alternate provider for emergency services like a landing craft or something, or a landing craft. And I sent Richie the phone number and contact info for a company in Anacortes. It is expensive to hire one of those to charter one on a daily basis or an hourly basis. It's about, I believe it's $550 an hour, and the smaller and that's would be like a 34 passenger craft that is Coast Guard inspected. It will not be able to transport cars, but just passengers and cargo. But it could, you know, take a gurney over or something like that. So anyway, I think we need continue to explore a better way of doing it.
Mary, you did this last month. You put your comments in writing and sent it to us. Can you do that again to summarize what you just shared?
Yep.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the work you're doing with the committee and with Dave and whoever else is on that committee. Okay.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Mary too for these very thoughtful comments. And Raymond, I think we can put this again on our agenda for December. These points, you know, how we can, that Mary has raised.
Absolutely. And I have some others. I've made some calls too for emergency. I will send you an email separately. So Chris, you have a comment?
Yes, just a small one for Mike on the listing about suggestions for ferry names. Maybe it would help eliminate any confusion to simply mention that or mention specifically the suggestions that were taken at the Saturday market. That way, anybody who's looking at the requirements or stuff, if they've already turned
You're breaking up, Chris. But
something in
okay.
just to know that they don't have to do it again. Oh,
Okay.
Sorry. I don't know if there's anything I mentioning specifically that some about the suggestions that were received at the Saturday market.
Okay. Good point.
That's all.
Other questions or comments? And I have a quick question for you all, just because of the seriousness of this last outage. I wanted everybody to hear Rich Hudson's full report before we did open session and made comments. I wanted that report to be made first. So this is the very first time we've ever had open session at the end of the meeting instead of the beginning. Any feedback on that? Was this a good idea? Should we go back to open session at the beginning versus the end? Any thoughts based on those of you who have spoken? Okay, I'll figure it out when I do the agenda next month.
It's like dry dock. It moves around.
Bill Sager, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I did. Thanks a lot. I very much appreciated the fact, after listening to the recordings of other sessions, of being able to hear the closed session first and then be able to ask questions. It felt like when I was sitting as a participant in the opposite side, even though it was recording, that my questions after hearing the closed session information would then have to wait till the next meeting. That just didn't feel right. Right.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And I was thinking it would be especially valuable this time. So, okay.
I do have one other thing, if I could. I actually just wanted to add to Mary's comments, which I do also appreciate greatly. I just wonder, as we do think about the emergency plan, the emergency outage plan, I sat there wondering, what was I going to do if I was stuck on the other side on Gooseberry Point? Where was I actually going to park? The fact that we're having a passenger ferry would allow, well, maybe my wife to come across and then somehow get to the house and take care of the dogs. But, we just don't have those facilities that even, we deal with during a planned dry dock, to go back to. I wondered how much, I didn't see any reports of it, but how much crime occurred for the cars, if they did find the parking, all of those type of things. So I think as all of those plans try to get fleshed out, improved, looking at the entire scenario of what it means to come back and forth to the island is real important.
Thank you for that. Okay, others? Final comment. Okay.
Well, sneeze was appropriate. When we look at the costs of the outages, the costs of the loss of revenue, the islander, the cost of hiring that boat and putting those floats in, all that stuff. This really starts to make sense to have the spare ferry. It won't be like 75% of what the normal maintenance would be. It's going to be way down. And also the spare ferry can haul passengers, or we can figure a way in which during dry dock, if there's no dock work, it just could take over. And if there is, we can figure a way out to land it. So that again, you don't have to rent the boat from the other guys. Now, I understand they like to rent the boat, but we got to consider all sources here and all
Okay.
All the different things that go into this.
And I think also keep in mind, I do believe I heard Rich say that we are in year 3 of a 5-year contract with the Salish Sea right now. So just put that in context, but it is an appropriate time to look at all the options going forward. So thank you for that. I think the meeting should conclude at this point. I want to thank everybody for their participation. Mike?
New business is there, and the only thing I wanted to do was formally congratulate you, Todd, on reelection. In my nearly 1 year on this committee, I've been so grateful for the way you participate and give us support.
I think is he on here? I don't know. I think that might have eluded him, but yeah, he's been wonderful. He's been stellar. He really has. He's been a good participant. So thank you all. I hope you all apply to be on LIFAC next year. And applications are due January 4th, and reach out to me personally. I can guide you. I'm happy to call any of you or talk to any of you to answer any questions. So thank you for being here.
And that goes for me too. I'm happy to speak with any of you to share my experiences.
And
Likewise.
absolutely. Thank you.
Same here.
Can I have a real quick
Thank you.
question, Raymond? When exactly do you guys leave? Is it January 1st, the end of January? When does your term end? And it's yours and Charles?
We turn into pumpkins at midnight on January 31st.
Okay. Thank you.
But the county council selects new members January 11th. Applications are due the 4th. I think those are the dates. So, okay, thank you all for being here. Mary, thanks again for hosting us. Take care.
Thank you, Mary. Thanks all.